5.
Curry hits a three.
4.
Houston with a drive. Deep left field.
3.
Patrick hit by Watt. Sack number 10.
2.
Messi with a record-breaking goal.
1.
Welcome to BSS Sports. Now, here are your hosts, Steve and Trevor.
Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of BSS Sports. My name is Steven Schill with the ever-lovely Trevor Struthers. And the NFL playoffs have been decided. In the AFC, we have Oakland at Houston and Miami at Pittsburgh. And on the flip side, in the NFC, the Giants at Green Bay and Detroit at Seattle. And the big thing that stands out for me right away is the Houston Texans. The whole year we've been going around saying, oh my God, Brock Osweiler, what a horrible person. They made it last year, and they make it again this year. But people are saying, okay, it's just the defense, and you know what? That's fantastic. Say whatever the heck you want about their defense. It is good. They've only allowed 328 points against. However, they're 9-7, and they're tied with the Tennessee Titans for the record. And the Indianapolis Colts are 8-8, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars are 3-13. So it's not an overly powerful division, but everybody in their division is kind of along the same lines except for Jacksonville, which they always seem to be on the outside. If you're the Houston Texans, are you the one that's supposed to be eliminated first out of these playoffs, or do you think their defense are going to be able to hold it, even though they don't really want to use Brock Osweiler, even though they gave him a bunch of money?
Well, their offense is ugly as heck right now, but I mean, Oakland's kind of in that same position where you don't know who you're going to be starting quarterback-wise. You don't really know who you're going to start for Houston. Right now, Tom Savage is in concussion protocol, so I guess if he clears that, then he'll be their guy. Brock Osweiler, otherwise, that guy that they're paying a lot of money that probably should be starting in the playoffs, could get that start. But obviously, he's been disappointing this year to the point where he lost his job. The thing with Houston that really stands out for me is not only is their defense awesome, but they're also pretty good at home as well to go along with that, sporting a record of 7-1 at home. So that's going to be tough to counter for Oakland, let alone, they don't even know who they're going to be starting quarterback-wise. There's a lot of people in Oakland that are down on Matt McGloin and that would rather see Cook get the start, the third stringer. But, I mean, that goes to show you right there. If McGloin's shoulder is fine, and it's his non-throwing shoulder, if his non-throwing shoulder is fine and good to go, it sounds like Raiders fans might want the third stringer to start anyways. And anytime your third stringer is starting a game for you in the playoffs, it's not a pretty sight.
Now, the Dallas Cowboys, I just want to talk about them for a couple of minutes because it's a pretty big turnaround compared to last season. I know Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott came into the team as rookies, and it kind of energized the team, and it puts a spotlight, more so I feel, on the draft. And side note, if you've ever seen Draft Day, Cleveland Browns have the first overall pick, and we'll see if it ends up being the exact same as that movie. Good movie, by the way. But the Dallas Cowboys, they had Mark Sanchez and Tony Romo all participate in the last game, and that was a show and a half. So obviously they're going with Dak in the playoffs, but do the Cowboys have a legitimate shot here? I mean, they have a bye week right away, so that helps out, but what do you think about the Dallas Cowboys this year?
Well, I mean, they're an offense that can hit you from anywhere. And, I mean, a lot of credit needs to be given to that offensive line. And, I mean, we'll get to this a bit later with Ezekiel Elliott, but that offensive line is the best in football, to the point where it's not even close. And they allow the offense to do so much. They allow Ezekiel Elliott to do what he does, and they allow Dak Prescott the time to find, Dez Bryant or somebody else, Jason Witten, maybe even the tight end. I mean, that's another thing as well. I mean, even to have experienced guys that you're throwing the ball to, if you're Dallas, is something that's fantastic to go along with the fact that your running back and your quarterback, well, they've been fantastic. They're also rookies. I mean, Dak Prescott, you talk about the draft, he was a 4th round pick, so that was a nice find for Dallas so far. I mean, he's no doubt been the best rookie quarterback in the NFL this year. Carson Wentz, 2nd overall, is probably the guy to fall in behind him, and Jared Goff, I don't know if I'm missing anybody, but Jared Goff, the guy that went 1st overall to the Rams, probably falls in 3rd place or last, whatever you want to call it, on that chart. So, I mean, Dak Prescott was a real nice find so far. The real interesting question is, can he keep it up here in the playoffs?
Now, going back to last season, the Denver Broncos won the Super Bowl. This year, there was a whole heck of a lot of nothing from them. Is this a big disappointment for the Broncos?
I guess so. I mean, their offense was a major disappointment. Obviously, losing Peyton Manning's going to do that to a franchise, but they just really struggle at moving the football. Not as much to the point where they're like the LA Rams, where they really could not move the football at all, but it was to the point where it was really hurting them in games. And I mean, their defense the last couple of weeks hasn't exactly been stellar. I mean, I guess against a depleted Oakland team without a quarterback, because they ended up having to go to the third stringer when McGloin got hurt yesterday when that happened. So the defense had a good day there, but I mean, the week before against Kansas City, it was ugly, and I know that because I had their defense on my fantasy team in the championship week. So that right there was ugly for the defense. But for the most part, I mean, they're a fantastic defense. They have a great secondary. It's hard to pass on that team. But their offense really just couldn't get going at all. They didn't have a running back that they could really rely on, a quarterback that couldn't really take the reins of the team, and it hurt them. And now, I mean, they're going to lose Gary Kubiak, obviously, because he's going to step away for health reasons. But, I mean, that's a big question mark now, because that's one of the two coaches in the franchise's history to win a Super Bowl, and now they need to go out and find a guy to replace him a year after losing Peyton Manning.
So the NFL Black Monday is today, and that's what they call when everybody gets fired. So the Rams fired head coach Jeff Fisher. Earlier in the year, there was all the talk about how, oh my God, they just signed him for a contract extension, and then they fired him, which wasn't exactly true. The contract extension was made in the summer, but it was just come to light for whatever reason when he was fired. I don't know how that works. Anyway, Jaguars fired head coach Gus Bradley. The Bills fire Rex Ryan, which I feel is one of the bigger headlines because there was some hope there. There's always some hope, but I feel Bills Nation was pretty hyped up about it. The 49ers fire a head coach Chip Kelly and a GM Trent Bach. And the Chargers fired Mike McCoy. And then, as you said earlier, the Broncos head coach Gary Kubiak stepped down. Now, two of these things I want to talk about really quickly, and then we'll move on. Number one, the Bills fire Rex Ryan. Did they keep the other Ryan? And then the Chargers fired Mike McCoy. Was that only because they lost to the Browns?
Well, I can tell you both Ryans were gone. Rob Ryan kind of, I guess, had that funny role where he was an assistant head coach. I guess, in a way, kind of Rex's carry-on. But I wonder if that was maybe something that Rex worked out with the team. I don't know. It was kind of funny seeing the Ryan brothers next to each other. And what was the second one?
Chargers fired Mike McCoy. Is that only because they're the only team in the NFL to lose to the Browns this season?
Oh, I mean, it very well could have been. They lost to the Browns. I mean, the Steelers almost lost to the Browns, but that was literally without Roethlisberger, without Le'Veon Bell, and I don't think Antonio Brown played either. So, I mean, that happened. There may have even been guys on the line that didn't play for Pittsburgh in that game, but I mean, yeah, it could very well be because of that, but the Chargers overall just didn't have a very good year. I stand by the fact that I think if their running back Melvin Gordon was healthy for that game against Cleveland, they would have snuck that out. But I mean, if it comes down to one guy being hurt and that one guy's not even your quarterback is a difference in a game and losing to a team that won one game all year and it was against you, then that's pretty ugly. And, I mean, who knows what's ahead for the Chargers? I mean, for all we know, they maybe could have played their last game in San Diego. So it would be really interesting to see where this offseason takes them now that not only do they have to worry about relocation rumors and what's going to happen there, but they also have to find a new head coach.
You're listening to BSS Sports on 91X. My name is Steven Schill, and that is Trevor Struthers. And the NFL MVP discussion is one that is interesting this year because it just feels like it could be so many different people. There's a lot of ones in the running, but Trevor, just for time's sake, who would be your MVP this season and why? And then we'll have a bit of an argument.
Man, it's hard to pick because, I mean, Drew Brees, if you look at it, has actually had a pretty fantastic year. But due to the fact that the team didn't really make the playoffs and that defense hurt them so much, it can't really be him. It's so hard to pick one because the race is wide open. You're seeing how important Derek Carr was to the Oakland Raiders, and that's what this MVP award is for. It's for, who's most important to the team. If that guy's gone, who's going to struggle the most. And it might be Aaron Rodgers. I struggle to give it to Tom Brady just because he missed those few games at the beginning of the year. With that being said, Aaron Rodgers had a very iffy first half of the year, but he was also the most relied on guy when it came to running the football. that sort of changed recently with Ty Montgomery, but Aaron Rodgers has gone on a run. His last 7 games, he's thrown 18 touchdowns and no interceptions. The Packers have been 6-1 in that time span, and in the last 6 weeks, they haven't lost a game, and that's how they even made the playoffs in the first place. And I mean, they could be really dangerous in the playoffs as well, just because they're on that run. But Matt Ryan's a guy that I feel like we always overlook the Falcons. And we don't really look at Matt Ryan as well as a guy that could potentially win it. I think when all is said and done, Aaron Rodgers will probably end up winning it. But, I mean, I'm really in a toss-up between Matt Ryan and Aaron Rodgers as to who really should be the MVP.
Okay, so you're going in the quarterback, and we're going to have a discussion here because the quarterback has to rely on a couple different things, like the offensive line, the wide receivers, tight ends, everybody doing their part. The NFL as a whole, that's their biggest problem, is it's the only sport out there where one player really can't take over a game. They can, but they can't. They have to. Everything else has to work together with them and be relied upon. So for me, it would be Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, the guy's a rookie. I don't know if you can take that into consideration at all, but the guy comes into the year, and sure, he's got 400 more yards than Le'Veon Bell, but you got to remember Le'Veon Bell missed a couple of games earlier in the year. But I just feel that from a standpoint of the MVP, you have to be the leader in your category. So if it's going to be a quarterback, it's going to have to be Drew Brees. It doesn't matter that he didn't make the playoffs. It's a team sport, so it's not always going to be the most amazing person. For some reason, it's taken into account, but for Drew Brees, Ezekiel Elliott, and who the heck is the wide receiver with the most yards this year? I don't even know that. But the point being is you want to have the top. You want to be the best that there was. You don't want to be second best. You don't want to be third best. You want to be the best. Have the most. And Drew Brees and Ezekiel Elliott do. So sure, if you want to give it to Drew Brees, all right. But I think it'd be Ezekiel Elliott out of the 3 categories.
Well, the thing about that, though, is does Ezekiel Elliott I mean, a lot of it is, where would they be without that guy? And, I mean, they could really have, in my opinion, anybody at the halfback position and still be really successful just because of that offensive line and their ability to create holes. I mean, they have even a fantastic center that knows what the heck he's doing once the ball's snapped, and then just a line in general that knows how to pick up assignments and knows what to do with their assignments, and it creates those holes for Ezekiel. Ezekiel's performed fantastic with it. But with that being said as well, he's not what he is without that offensive line. And you can't really give it to the offensive line as a whole for the MVP, although that would be hilarious if they found a way to do that. I think instead you'd have to look at the quarterback, the guy that actually runs the offense, the leader of the team. And that Derek Carr is a clear case of that with the Raiders, of just the leadership that he brings. We're hearing about that now that he's injured, now that they won't have him in the playoffs. And we see that at times with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, if you watched that game yesterday with the Lions, and if you didn't, I don't know what you were thinking. It was a big game for the division. I mean, Washington lost, so both teams were in the playoffs anyway, so it wasn't as do or die as it was potentially going to be, but it was still a big game heading in, and Aaron Rodgers was fantastic. I mean, nobody scrambles better under pressure than Aaron Rodgers. He rolled out twice against that Detroit defense to find a man in the end zone. It was incredible just watching what Aaron Rodgers does. There's times where he sees, oh, hey, look, there's a hole. I'll run through that hole or around that hole for a first down, and he did that at times. He really can do everything, and I think that's something that should be taken into consideration as well when looking at an MVP.
I'm just saying, the wide receivers as well, they're the only players on the field that's basically solely relying on them, because it's them against 1 or 2 defenders. There's nobody else.
But what
involved.
it comes down to is when you have great quarterbacks like that, they're throwing them to the wide receiver. It's hard not to catch it almost when the throws are that good, is what I'm saying. And they're like laying it right in their hands, where it's like, I mean, Davante Adams, a few weeks ago dropped 2 touchdowns, and nobody's like, oh, Aaron Rodgers, he's got to be better. They were looking at Davante Adams and the drop passes. Why? Because they were easy touchdowns that were given to him by Aaron Rodgers. And wide receiver, if you look at it, I guess maybe a lot of people don't consider it that hard of a position to play in comparison to the others. But definitely quarterback, I would say, is the hardest position to play, and maybe that's why we're looking at why it always seems to be a quarterback, and also leadership. I guess you could also bring into this. It always seems to be a quarterback that wins the MVP.
So we have to go through one more discussion pretty quickly, and that's UFC 207, Ronda Rousey versus Amanda Nunes. If you hadn't heard, Amanda beat the living tar out of Rousey, and there's all this talk about how Rousey's, she's going to quit, go to MMA, and this and that, but I feel to an extent there has to be some respect shown to her, because women's MMA was basically nothing until the hype of Ronda Rousey. Trevor, the fight and what I just said.
Well, I mean, Ronda really was crushed. There's no other way to put it. And for some reason, it really seemed like she wanted to try to stand with Amanda Nunes, which really wasn't the best strategy for anyone to kind of, I mean, if you've seen some of the photos from the fight, Amanda Nunes hits really hard and probably the hardest hitting striker in the division. So I don't know why it took, the fight only lasted 48 seconds, right? So we're looking at a very small sample size of Rousey's game plan. Not to mention for those 48 seconds, she was probably being hit really hard for about 30 of them. So, I mean, that right there is difficult. I think we saw her try to clinch there at the end. And I mean, I even saw this video after the fight come out of the fight with, you can hear Rousey's coach in her corner, Edmund Tervarden, shouting his words of wisdom, which were pretty much just move your head, nothing like, hey, try to take her to the ground. It wasn't until like the final 10 seconds where he's like, clench her, try to clench her, It seemed like he wanted her to maybe try to stand with Nunes, or at least convinced her to the point where she thinks she can stand with Nunes, or really even stand with anybody. That's not Ronda Rousey's strength. Ronda Rousey's strength is her judo, it's her wrestling, it's her ability to take her opponent down and put her in an arm bar. That's what she's been known to do. That's what she couldn't do against Nunes, and it's maybe because she was trying to stand with Nunes, and that's why it got really ugly really quickly for Ronda Rousey, and now we're to the point where we're wondering if we're ever going to see her in the octagon again.
That's it for this edition of BSS Sports. Make sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at BSS Sports, archiving all of our work on YouTube at BSS Productions. For Trevor, Struthers, and myself, Steven Schill, we will see you next Monday.